Okay, so today I want to start the show by talking about the strategy of the 2020 Democratic primary. So I'm not going to focus so much on political issues today, as far as what positions do I agree with and don't I agree with. If you've been watching this show, if you've been listening to the podcast or the radio show for a while, you know that my politics, for example, are to the left of Joe Biden. So I would like a more progressive nominee. I like Bernie Sanders. I like Elizabeth Warren. From the sort of more well-known candidates, I like some of Andrew Yang's ideas, although I have questions about the way he would implement some of them. But the point is, Joe Biden is a Hillary Clinton centrist. And while I think Joe Biden's a great debater, as I've said before, that doesn't mean that I actually want Joe Biden to be president of the United States, given other options. Joe's politics are to my right. But I've made it really clear that if Biden's the nominee, I'm not going to vote for him in the primary. But if he wins the primary, if Biden's the nominee, I'm sure as hell voting for Joe Biden over Donald Trump. But that's the sort of political stuff. I don't want to talk so much about the politics, but what instead is the strategy of running another centrist Democrat against Donald Trump after what happened in 2016 with Hillary Clinton. One of the biggest red flags for me when it comes to strategy from Joe Biden came on day one of Joe Biden's campaign, where he didn't really do an announcement where he presents his ideas, his platform. He didn't even tout too many of his credentials, which are actually numerous, although they still don't make him anything other than a centrist. Biden focused on Charlottesville and Trump. So we'll see whether this changes as Joe Biden keeps campaigning. But his opening statement, his announcement video, was a let's defeat Trump speech, which to me is already the wrong strategy and is having is triggering in my mind memories of some elements of 2016. Focusing on let's defeat Trump is like running a campaign on we will indict Trump or we will impeach Trump. Leave that up to the current elected officials in the House and Senate. Let them figure out, are impeachment proceedings the right thing? Is impeachment debate the right thing? 25th Amendment, whatever, right? If you think Trump should be impeached, say it, as some candidates have said. But the campaign can't just be about Trump is bad on Charlottesville and I'm going to be better. So problem one for Biden in strategy is that so far it's been hugely about the platform is get rid of Donald Trump. And I'm the person, says Joe Biden, to get rid of Donald Trump. And he may be, but this is not the right way to go about it. So that's problem number one. Problem number two with Biden's campaign is that Biden is playing around the edges and not with the plot. Or to use like a literature analogy, Biden's running a campaign, but he's touting only the prologue and the acknowledgments page at the end of the book rather than the actual substance, right? And what I mean by that is this recent example. Biden talked about finding a middle ground on climate change. That's a pro-status quo establishment framing, finding a middle ground on climate change. Climate change is a crisis. We need systemic change to deal with that issue. Arwa Madawi has a really good article about this in The Guardian. Biden is not someone who has said, because I don't think he believes, that we need significant systemic change in America to solve the major issues of our time, those being campaign finance, how politics is financed, climate change, the massive inequality that has created all sorts of overclass and underclass structures in America, including on healthcare, including on education, including on just basic, affording cost of living. Sanders and Warren are not just offering progressive policies at the micro level, which I like, but the macro that they are presenting, Bernie maybe slightly more than Elizabeth Warren, admittedly, is that we need systemic change. We need systemic change when it comes to the primary power relationships that exist in the United States. Biden proposes some policies, but it's all about let's get back to center-left Democratic establishment rule, status quo, where we sort of deal with a few symptoms around the edges. We get rid of a president that won't take white nationalism seriously and this type of thing. And these things are important, but they're not the plot, right? Yes, Trump has allowed extremism to fester. It would be great to get rid of Trump and put in place anyone who would immediately change tone on that issue. But that's not a platform, and it's certainly not particularly progressive. So what we need to do is prevent Biden from being Hillary 2020, whether he wins or loses the primary, okay? If you don't like Biden's politics, do what I'm going to do, which is you vote in the primary for somebody else who's more progressive. If a more progressive candidate doesn't win and a centrist candidate wins, whether it's Biden or somebody else, I still think that they can beat Trump. They just need to play their cards right. They need to play their cards right in the key states that Hillary narrowly lost: Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan. There are others. Trump isn't that popular. Whoa, punched my mic because I'm getting so wound up here. Trump isn't that popular in those states. He can be beaten. But if it's going to be a centrist Democrat, they actually need to run their campaign correctly. And it's not clear at all that Joe Biden is doing that at this point in time, even though he is polling very, very well. If Biden wins the primary and he's polling well, then what we need to do on the progressive left is make sure that Biden runs the correct centrist Democrat campaign so that if it's Biden, he might actually defeat Donald Trump, not losing to Trump like Hillary did in 2016, interference and DNC meddling aside. Every day, I am seeing more and more signs that Biden is running a Hillary 2020 campaign effectively, and this is a real problem. And we're going to have to continue thinking about what the strategy is going to be during the primary and what's the strategy if Joe Biden is ultimately the nominee. I will vote for him over Trump. There's no question about that. Not even for a second. I am not going to be part of the problem of those who ultimately may help to put Donald Trump in the White House for a second term. But we've got to keep talking about this for sure. Today's program is sponsored in part by our friends over at LochNessCrypto.com. The team is based in Boise, Idaho, and they've made it their mission to help just everyday people navigate the world of cryptocurrency, and they've been doing it since 2012. They've actually been teaching a course about cryptocurrency at the Boise State Computer Science Department for years, and they've taken that curriculum and sort of packed it into an easy to digest course that's now available to anybody who wants it, called the Cryptocurrency Starter Kit. And this is the type of thing that crypto has really been lacking. And it's one of the reasons we maybe haven't seen adoption of currencies like Bitcoin and others on a larger scale. Normal people who are not tech experts need a step-by-step guide that's easy to understand about how they can get involved with cryptocurrency in a way that is sort of safe and manageable. And that's what the Cryptocurrency Starter Kit provides. It's a 5-part video series, which includes how to safely obtain cryptos, where to set up your accounts, how to protect those accounts from hackers, importantly, how to move crypto into physical hardware wallets, and also how to just prepare for the future of the space. You also get a free physical hardware wallet. It's sort of like a flash drive where you can safely store your Bitcoin or other cryptos offline. And you also get 1 hour of one-on-one phone or Skype mentoring with one of Loch Ness Crypto's experts. They're the only company in the crypto space that offers a service like this. And it all comes with the Cryptocurrency Starter Kit. They have a special offer specifically for the David Pakman Show audience. If you click the link under this video, you'll get $200 off the Cryptocurrency Starter Kit. Check it out using the link down below.